بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. ربنا زدنا علما يا كريم. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانشر علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانشر علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. So we stopped at ayah number 53 last time, and a little bit of a sequence prior to that as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes about the day of judgment. And then over there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in ayah number 52, وَيَوْمَ يَقُولُ, and on that day Allah is going to say, right, وَيَوْمَ يَقُولُ نَادُوا شُرَكَائِيَ الَّذِينَ زَعَمْتُمْ. On that day it will be said, go ahead, call all of your partners that you claim to associate instead of me as gods. This particular ayah, sometimes some of the scholars, they have said that this is one of the first times these individuals who had done shirk, they will obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah is like, go ahead and call everybody that you used to associate partners. They're like, okay, we're going to go and call. But that's why they say, طَاعَةٌ غَيْرُ مُجْزِئَةٌ. It's obedience, but that obedience is absolutely of no avail. So they will submit to Allah, they will obey to Allah. But on a day that submission is of no avail to them. غَيْرُ مُجْزِئَةٌ. بَلْ زَعَمْتُمْ شُرَكَائِيَ الَّذِينَ زَعَمْتُمْ فَدَعَوْهُمْ فَلَمْ يَسْتَجِيبُوا لَهُمْ. They're going to call, they're going to listen to Allah, and Allah's like, go ahead and call them. They're going to go call. And when they're going to call all the people that they associated as gods other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And over here this refers to shirk i'tiqadi, that I actually believe that something else is hasha other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has all the power, or amali. Was it my money? Was it my kids? Right? Was it this? What was it? Was it the quest for dunya? What did I use as an excuse not to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And I placed that in between me and Allah. And I said, no, it's okay. As long as I get this, although Allah is the one who will provide, but if I work and I make sure I get this, I will get it. But at the end of the day, Allah is the one who gives, not you, not me. So, فَلَمْ يَسْتَجِيبُوا لَهُمْ, nobody is going to respond to them. فَلَمْ يَسْتَجِيبُوا, they will not respond to them. وَجَعَلْنَا بَيْنَهُمْ مَوْبِقًا, and Allah is going to create between them مَوْبِقًا. وَبَقٌ, multiple meanings. One is a partition type of a thing, right? The second, and this is a more harsher meaning, وَبَقٌ مَوْبِقٌ, is a barrier in Jahannam that has been created by the excretions of all the blood and the wounds of the Ahlun Nar. All of that excretion is collected, and then that becomes a barrier. That is used as a barrier for people. That is called mawbiq. وَرَأَى الْمُجْرِمُونَ النَّارِ, and the people, i.e. mujrims, the wicked ones, the ones who, criminals, the one who associated partners with Allah, disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. رَأَى الْمُجْرِمُونَ النَّارَ, when they're going to look at the fire. فَظَنُّوا أَنَّهُمْ مُوَاقِعُوهَا, they're going to believe there's no way out here. I'm going to fall into it. لَا مُحَالَةً, there's no exit. وَلَمْ يَجِدُوا عَنْهَا مَصْرِفًا, they are not going to be able to find any escape route, any fire exit to get away from the fire. Notice how this word masrifa means sarafa shay'an, is to conjugate. Sarf means to conjugate or to shape and reshape the form of something. Okay. Masrifa over here is you have a path, and to be able to formulate a new path out of the existing path. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the next ayah, what does He starts? they will not find any sarf over there. وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ. There's a very subtle imagery here. Over there, you will not find any ways of exiting. But Allah in this Quran has sarrafna, i.e., we have explained to you in varying different dispositions and manners everything في هذا القرآن للناس من كل شيء. من كل من كل مثل. Sorry. من كل, I don't know why I said من كل مثل. Allah has explained in this Quran every form of parable and an example that you and I need. So over there, they will not find any masrif. But in this Quran, Allah has said, sarrafna, we have explained all the possibilities that a person might be able to find an excuse, exit out of this. Allah has given you an example for that, and an example for that, and an example for that. Example of dunya, example of mal, example of children, examples of a person who has a burden. Kalhimari yahmilu asfara. All of the varying examples. So when you're seeing everything, Allah is like explained all of that. Min kulli mathal. Every parable and example that you needed in this life, Allah has described. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says absolute truth. وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. The problem is, insan is very argumentative. We love to argue. It is mentioned that these ayat in actual were revealed for Ubay ibn Khalaf and Nadr ibn al-Haritha. So Nadr ibn al-Haritha, the story that was mentioned about him was that Nadr ibn al-Haritha, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, what's the ayah about Zaqum? Inna shajarat al-Zaqumi ta'amul athim. Okay, indeed the shajara of Zaqum. Now Zaqum for the Arabs was dates when it was mixed with fresh cream. Dates when it was, mixed with fresh cream, and they would add sometimes to it, if the dates were not sweet, some honey or some semen, some ghee on it. Okay, that was Zaqum for them. The actual words, the Zaqum in the Arabs, that was the word Zaqum. So Nadr ibn Haritha, when he heard this ayah, what did he do? To mock Rasulullah. Because the ayat of the Quran, they were talking about Jahannam. Inna shajarat al-Zaqumi ta'amul athim. Right? Kal-muhl yashwi al-wujuh. Yaghli al-butun. It is so hot that it is going to your stomachs. It will boil the stomachs. Okay? So all of that, Prophet is giving about azab. So Nadr ibn Haritha comes and he says, Subhanallah, هذا الذي يقول لكم ينبت النار في الشجرة والنار يأكل الشجرة. So first thing he says, look at the argument he's saying. He said, look, this guy is coming and claiming to you that there is shajarat al-Zaqum and this Zaqum, but then he says this is fire. Doesn't the fire eat the tree? فَكَيْفَ يَنْبُتُ الشَّجَرَةُ فِي النَّارِ. How can a tree grow in fire? What kind of stupid nonsense is this? That's what he's talking to Rasulullah. Then he says, Ya Muhammad, ji'na laka zaqum. We brought for you this zaqum. Go and eat. He mocked. Right? At that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. That how argumentative is insan amongst all the beings. The second was the story of Nadr ibn Ubay ibn Khalaf, something similar with bones. And the third was not the story, the sabab of this revelation, but this is a story that is always mentioned, which is that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he entered the house of Ali radiallahu anha and Fatima radiallahu anha, and they were sleeping. And it was the time for tahajjud. So he tells Ali radiallahu anhu, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that you're Ahlul Bayt. Your maqam is that you should be up and praying tahajjud. So what did he say? He said, oh yeah, Rasulullah, Our ruh is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If He wishes, He can return our ruh. It's not my fault. So then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he started slapping his thigh like this, and he said, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. Right? This is Ali radiallahu anh, who's guaranteed Jannah. Right? Even him, there were times emotionally where he was not ready for, and Rasulullah is coming and giving him some advice. Even him, who's guaranteed Jannah by Rasulullah, he argued sometimes with Rasulullah about the affairs of the deen. Like this, you know what? It was like Rasulullah is like giving them advice that wake up. But he's like, come on, Rasulullah, like, and this was not a joke. He was upset. Prophet ﷺ was upset on that. But that also tells us a very important lesson, that sometimes we believe that you have to be perfect all the time. That's not possible for a human being. It's not possible to be all the time in the same state. Sometimes our lives and what we're going through in our lives will have an impact on my spirituality. That doesn't mean that I wholesale exited from this thing. That means that I'm just going through a rough patch. I'll figure things out. I'm not disowning my deen. It's just hard for me to do it now. But it'll get better and easier later. Okay? Zajjaj, who was one of the mufassirs of the Quran, he used to say, كُلُّ مَا يَعْقِلُ مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالْجِنِّ يُجَادِلُ. Every form of uqala. How many uqala there are? Intellectual beings. We've always said this multiple times. 3. Angels, jinns, and insan. So Zajjaj says that malaika, yes. Yes, there used to be. So the angels and the jinns and the insan. So Zajjaj says every intellectual being argues. The angels argued with the Rasulullah, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Why are you creating something? وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. Right? Oh, come on, like they're literally asking a question and also saying, hey, the argument is we're better. Okay? The jinns argued. وَالْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرُ هَذِهِ الْأَشْيَاءِ. So this statement, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ, i.e. from all the things that can argue, insan is the most argumentative. That's another way to understand this ayah. That not the intent, like not my natural disposition to argue, but amongst all the beings that can argue, we are the most as a population. That makes sense? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says after that, He says, وَمَا مَنَعَ النَّاسِ. And what has prevented the people أَن يُؤْمِنُوا, to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِذْ جَاءَهُمُ الْهُدَى, a guidance, hidayah has come to them. What prevented them from following guidance when it came to them? وَيَسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّهُم, and they seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِلَّا, except, what prevented them? Except أَن تَأْتِيَهُمْ سُنَّةُ الْأَوَّلِينَ, except that they're waiting to do two things. Allah is saying, so there's two ways to understand the first part of the ayah. The first part of the ayah is, the first understanding is that these people are not going to accept the deen. So first understand it in English and then we'll go back in Arabic. They will not accept and seek forgiveness until they see the punishment happening to somebody else. Sunnatul awwaleen. They see some other nation being punished and they're like, oh, I want to believe. That's one way. Okay. Second is that in the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were not going to accept. وَمَا أَمَنَعَ النَّاسُ إِذْ جَاءَهُمُ الْهُدَى وَيَسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّهُم. They're not going to accept even if Sunnatul Awwaleen happens to them. Even if they are being punished, they're not going to accept. Is that meaning clear? There are two ways to understand it. One is what is preventing them from accepting. What is preventing them from accepting is they're saying, oh Allah, okay, if you want us to believe, show us a sign, punish somebody, and then we'll see how true you are. Second is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, it doesn't matter. Even if you punish them the way people of the first, they will not accept. Okay? Both meanings have been mentioned in the tafsir. So وَمَا مَنَعَ النَّاسُ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا, right? That what, do you have a question? وَمَا مَنَعَ النَّاسَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا, and what has prevented people أَن يُؤْمِنُوا, that they believe, إِذْ جَاءَهُمُ الْهُدَى, that until a guidance comes to them, وَيَسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّهُم, and then they seek forgiveness after guidance, they become Muslims and they ask for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. رَبَّهُم إِلَّا, except أَن تَأْتِيَهُمْ سُنَّةُ الْأَوَّلِينَ أَوْ يَأْتِيَهُمُ الْعَذَابُ قُبُلًا. They are waiting for the punishment to come, and they will accept that at the moment of the punishment. The word qubula, right? Majority of the reciters, 3 of the reciters have recited it as qubula. The rest of them, they have recited as qibala. So the meaning becomes even more profound. Qubula means anwa'ul adhab, variety of punishments. Okay, so it is, qubula is alluding to the variety of the punishment. Qibala is the veracity, how clear and vivid it becomes in front of them. It's as if it is coming directly to them. Qibala, in front of them. So both meanings, i.e. they see until, they will not believe until they see variety of adab and punishments right in front of their faces. Only then would they accept. Okay? And we see this all the time in our social media environment. Sometimes we can capture videos of even small minor turbulence in a plane, where people feel like, okay, stuff, they have these air pockets where the plane can suddenly dip, right? What happens? All the juice goes flying and stuff like that, right? And all the people who don't want, like, all the beliefs that they have, everything goes out of the window, and oh my God comes out of their mouth, because they know at that moment it's only God who can help. Okay? I was traveling to Houston from Edmonton way back, sometime in late 2000. So the lady that sat next to me in the plane was a doctor. She was I don't know, some kind of doctor, and she was heading out to some very important medical conference. Now, if you've ever taken a flight over the Colorado mountains, that whole rocky chain, it's very turbulent, that flight, because of the mountains. It's like very, very turbulent. It's like, so this lady, we're having a conversation and talking about God, and she's like, yeah, I'm a doctor. I'm total atheist. I don't believe in any of that. And literally, when the plane started shaking, and it's not even like crazy turbulence, it's like enough that like things were moving like that, and like out of her instinctive reaction, she grabbed my hand. She's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then she let it go, like when everything calmed down. And then she turns, and I turned to her. I said, I thought there was no God. She's like, oh, come on. We all know that. It's instinct of human being. We all have to call to some higher power when we're in trouble. And she's like, and seconds later, she's like, there's no such thing as God. Right? This is the same thing that Allah says in the Quran. That when they are in the middle of the sea, they don't find anyone, they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way, and they're like, oh Allah, just rescue us and we will never forget you. And then when the ship reaches the shore, the person becomes as if he had never called on Allah ever before. And likewise is the case of the Muslims. We see this all the time, right? One of the places that I did my co-op, there was some senior guy, I don't know who he was, and we had a Jummah. So we had like on the floor, we had Jummah, and we'd go and pray Jummah over there. And obviously, your regular Jummah crowd, people who work in the corporate, you know what I'm talking about. You know the regular Jummah crowd. You know that there are other Muslims, they don't want to be shown as Muslim, but then there are people who are going to come for Jummah. There's usually 15, 20 people. They'll come and they'll do a little Jummah and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, this person shows up to Jummah. He's on my floor. He's like a C-level guy. And I'm like, he's a Muslim? Like, I'm totally shocked. Because like he like doesn't, you cannot tell by any way this person was a Muslim. So he showed up to the Jummah. I still vividly remember. And the Imam Ibrahim was there, Imam Ibn Abdul Hayy Patel, he was leading the Jummah. And then afterwards, he saw that, he's an older gentleman. So he saw my face, and I was just like in total shock that I worked with, I'm on the same floor with this guy. How is he a Muslim? And Imam Abdul Hayy was like much more senior, 30 years in that same company. He said, actually, the bonus season is very close by. So, a lot of people remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Jummah during this time. And also there's going to be a restructure. So there's a possibility of a very senior promotion that some people get. So they all show up for Jummah during that time. That's when they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? This is not normal. We do this all the time. Right? I want to donate something. Inshallah, I'll get the promotion. Right? Because we're seeking dunya from the a'mal of akhirah. We're seeking dunya. We have enough yaqeen that if I give for Allah 1,000 today, Allah will inshallah turn this for my promotion, inshallah, or for my bonus, or for my better appraisal. We do this all the time, right? As people working in the corporate field. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us hidayah and not use the deen for our personal gains. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا نُرْسِلُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِلَّا مُبَشِّرِينَ. We do not send messengers, mursaleen. Over here, mursaleen is referring to Anbiya alayhim salam. But what else could it refer to? Huh? It could be angels. What else? So what prevents us from using this mursaleen as any other messages is that the jama over here is salim. Okay, jama salim, right? Like that. The plural is intact. It's not broken. And when it is intact, it is for what? It is for uqala. It is for intellectual beings. And this is just, I don't go into grammar, but this is an important point. So why? Because somebody who doesn't have any knowledge of grammar is going to read this and he's going to say wama and not nursilu, sends, mursaleen, messengers. They may not think of messengers as prophet. They can say, oh, messengers, God can send messages through various ways, through loss of job or raise of promotion or loss of family or whatever. It could be anything. So Allah sends us messages, and all of these messages are meant to be glad tidings, mubashirin, or they're supposed to be things that we should be warned from. And the reason I mention this is because somebody on TikTok translated this ayah like that. And I was like, wait a minute, like, how is this ayah like that? And you go there, you realize mursaleen can only be uqala. So it can be either Anbiya alayhi salam or angels. Other than that, you can't say events are mursaleen. Right? And that's why having that knowledge of Arabic is important. Recently, somebody's forwarded me some TikTok video of like hijab and how there's no need to put hijab on using Quran. Right? And then like this is, I don't know if you know, it's going around on WhatsApp. Everyone's like sharing this on WhatsApp. And like even, it's going around in the uncle circle when my uncle, who hasn't messaged me in a while, messages me saying, can you please respond? I was like, oh, interesting. This has gone, it's spreading. And this lady is so convincing, right? So the only thing I told the people who messaged me, I said, this lady can't even recite the Quran in Arabic. We cannot take some person who can't even recite the Quran in Arabic, right? She's using English translations to insinuate meanings. And any new meaning of the Quran must be pegged to the old understanding of Arabic. We can't just come up with a new meaning that has not been existent in the Quran or never been used in the Arabic language. So that's why it's so important to understand this. That's why any of the meanings that I sometimes convey, they're either the Sahaba or the Tabi'een or Atba' al-Tabi'een, or at least in the Quran that word has been used similarly with a different meaning, and you can apply that meaning then over there. وَمَا نُرْسِلُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not send messengers, i.e. angels or prophets, except their purpose is, right, to deliver the news of good or warn people. What happens? وَيُجَادِلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. The ones who did disbelieve, i.e. i'tiqadi, they're disbelievers, they're not going to believe, or kufr of the opposite of shukr. that you're a Muslim, but you just don't want to follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want to suppress that part. Okay? وَيُجَادِلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, and the ones who did kufr, they argue bil-batil. Right? They have nothing to argue but falsehood. لِيُدْحِضُوا بِهِ الْحَقِّ. All they want is to discredit truth. Okay? Interesting words here. Yujadil. Yujadil is actually the act of taking two strands of strings and turning them into ropes. You know, when you take three strands and you turn them into ropes, right? And the act of taking a rope after it is turned and doing this with the rope to fortify it, that is called jadal. That is why in the Arabic language, in some of the narrations, you find that the description of the dhafa'ir, the, what do you call dhafa'ir in Arabic? Braids. Braids are called dhafa'ir, but they're also called jada'il. Braids are also called jada'il, which means the hair has been intertwined like this, and that braid is called jada'il. It's not that the hair is arguing, it's like one strand of the hair and another have intertwined and mixed with. And that's what argument is. You give, another person gives, another person gives, another person gives, another person gives, and that forms the argument. Okay? It's so amazing to actually understand how Arabic language works, right? Like everything, it's like nothing is just like I was talking to talking to her, and I was like, what was the example? For example, now. The word now. And then from now, if you put an S on it, what happens? Snow? Snow. Why? Why does it change? Why does it change? Huh? Ease of pronunciation. This is Arabic, bro. Arabic has that tasheel. He's like ease of pronunciation. Right? So all of these changes don't follow a standard rule. So somebody who's learning English for the first is very confusing. Right? Especially pronunciations. And then the variations in pronunciations. Right? About, like all of the variations that exist. So it's very difficult with English. But Arabic is a language that goes back to the roots. So does English to some form. But if it goes back to the root, you will find that every meaning, every word was created to convey a pre-existing meaning. So when we look at the car, and a car is called sayyara, it comes from the same word sira, comes from the same word sara, to travel, to traverse, to walk through. And then any object that allows us to travel and walk through becomes a sayyara. So even if today Umar radiallahu anh comes, he would not find the word sayyara. You wouldn't have to explain to him what sayyara is. The minute you say sayyara, he'll know that this is something that takes you somewhere, because of the root words of how it is, it's formulated. Okay? لِيُدْحِضُوا بِهِ الْحَقِّ. So they can discredit the haqq. لِيُدْحِضُوا, idhidad is basically to discredit something. Okay? There's no fancy explanations for that. وَاتَّخَذُوا آيَاتِي وَمَا أُنذِرُوا هُزُوًا. So what has happened? The messengers came. They give you glad tidings. They give you warnings. People who don't want to listen to that message, whether they are messengers, right? And there's, in brackets, you can say messengers, and anybody who carries the message, work of the messengers, if you want to have that meaning. You're going to tell them this is Islam. This is the message of Islam. They're going to argue with you. يُجَادِلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِالْبَاطِلِ لِيُدْحِضُوا بِهِ الْحَقِّ. And most of the time, the argument is what? To discredit. If you really think about it, it's not to accept. Very few people argue with you to understand. Most of the arguments, and that's why when people say, oh, respond to this guy on your message, respond to this guy on your new, I'm like, there's no point. Because their argument is not like, if they're interested, and if there is a genuine comment, you tell the person, okay, message me. And it has happened so many times. I'll say, if you really want to learn about Islam, message me privately. nobody messages. Because sometimes they will come in the I genuinely want to know about Islam, but I have this situation. Can you explain this publicly? And then they can start an entire discourse. It doesn't help. So Allah is saying that these people, messengers have come, people are spreading the message, they're going to argue to discredit this message. Anything they can do to discredit Islam. And why are they doing this? وَاتَّخَذُوا آيَاتِي وَمَا أُنذِرُوا هُزُوًا. They have taken the verses of Islam, ayati, that's one meaning. The other, all the signs that Allah has shown them about truthfulness of the Islam, they've taken that as a mockery. Come on, it's just a joke. We don't want to believe in this, right? And وَمَا أُنذِرُوا هُزُوًا, i.e. the books they have been warned in those books. There are warnings in those books, but they don't want to take those warnings. There are clear-cut warnings. It's clearly said in the Bible that women have to cover their heads. Clearly said, in like verses upon verses, where women are required to cover their head. Nobody wants to follow that. So many things that are absolutely wrong in the Bible, nobody says anything about it. So many things that are wrong in the Torah, nobody says anything about it. Why? Allah is like, وَمَا أُنذِرُوا, and whatever warnings they have in their own books or through the Quran, huzwa, they have taken it as a mockery. Jazakumullahu khair. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ ذُكِّرَ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ. And this ayah is extremely, extremely painful. Right? It's extremely painful because think of every person who is on the wrong. And an ayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has come to him, whether through him, whether through a lecture, whether through a reminder, whether through a WhatsApp. And today, we have zero excuses for not having heard of these ayahs. People know more about Islam today than they did in the past. People have more access to hadith today than they had in the past. The problem is what? The problem is many of the Sahabas, they knew very little Quran, but whatever they knew, they practiced. So it's not the matter of information, it's about application. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, and then who is more of a transgressor than the one dhukkira, he has been reminded. And this dhukkira is majhul, which means through WhatsApp, through Facebook, through Twitter, through a person, through a lecture, through your own readings, through various ways, message has come to you and you've been reminded about the ayat. بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ. And these ayat are the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا. The person turned away from these ayat. May Allah protect us from that. وَنَسِيَ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَهُ. He turned away, but he forgot that on the day of judgment you have to go and stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he forgot مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَهُ. Whatever his a'mal, his hand had sent forth for that future day, the day we're going to stand in front of Allah. إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we have certainly placed a veil. Akinna, we have certainly placed a veil on their hearts. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lift the veils of anybody that, their hearts have been veiled. So this veil is of a nature that this person is not, it's a secret veil. So he is not able to know that his heart is veiled. That's the problem. So it's a veil. People around him can tell that there is a veil. But he or she is not able to know that there is a veil. It's a veil of a type which is secret, right? And it is kept in such a manner that his heart is completely veiled. And why is that? Because he's able to hear, he's able to see, but the problem is أَن يَفْقَهُ. He is not able to have understanding. His heart hears and listens and stuff. All of that information goes in, but he's unable to process that information properly. My teacher used to say that, the heart is like a transfer function. like a mirror, right? And if your mirror has concavities or convexities, then the light going in, based on the intent of convexity, based on the extent of convexity or concavity, the light is going to refract and it is not going to have the clear impact, right? I'm sure all of you have taken these physics experiments with the prism. And when you put the light in, the light goes and it goes up or down. That's refraction. Oh, we did all of this, right, in science. That is concavities and convexities, a concave mirror and a convex mirror, concave mirrors. So many times our hearts, they end up becoming, because of deviances, because of our sins, because of whatever that we have done, and because of the lack of cleansing and polishing, right? We don't have no longer in our societies, we don't have gatherings where people just get together only and only to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No lecture. The only reason we're getting together is to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You go and read our books, they're filled, like Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani's book, Imam Nawawi's book, what's his name, man? I had his name in the Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, Ibn Hajar al-Haythami, Ibn Hajar al-Haythami. All of these, you pick up the books, they constantly talk about gatherings. Even in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it mentions that marra dakhala an-nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam fi masjidin fara'a hilaqain. He saw two groups of people. Hilaqun yudhakirullah. There was a group that was sitting and doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there was another group that was there, that was involved in ilm, in knowledge. فَذَهَبَ إِلَى. So he went and sat with the people who were seeking knowledge. Okay? So from here, there are two ways that people have understood this hadith, right? One, they said, ilm is of a higher category because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he went and sat with the people of ilm, hence ilm is of a higher category when he had a choice. The second group of people, they said, if you read some of the explanations of the hadith, they will tell you, no, that's not the case. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam always sits with the weak people. He doesn't sit with the stronger people. فَجَلَسَ مَعَ أَهْلُ الْعِلْمِ. He went and sat with the people of ilm because their ilm, they still had weakness in ilm, and their amal has not, their ilm and amal, there was a gap there. So he sat with them so he can push them to the level of amal of the people of dhikr. Because the people of dhikr understood the value of remembrance. They've received that knowledge and now they're in practice. But the people of ilm are still seeking what to practice. So Rasulullah went and sat with them. Okay? So over here, أَن يَفْقَهُوا, the biggest problem is the lack of understanding. So their hearts are sealed. And the reason they are sealed is there's no process of cleansing them. There's no process of reciting daily litanies. Constantly we have our eyes being filled and bombarded with things we should not be watching. And that prevents us from understanding the Quran and anything else that happens. وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا. And in their ears, there is deafness. Okay? وَقْرًا, a form of deafness. They're sometimes able to hear, sometimes they're not able to hear. Sometimes the message hits them, sometimes it doesn't. Okay? وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا وَإِن تَدْعُهُمْ إِلَى الْهُدَى. And if you guide them, if you call them towards guidance, فَلَن يَهْتَدُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا. In this state, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, even if they are in this state where their hearts are sealed and there's a covering on their heart and their hearts are not able to understand and their ears are somewhat sealed, if you call such a person to guidance, فَلَن يَهْتَدُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا. This person shall not be able to seek guidance. So what is it that we have to do? To work on our hearts in order for us to be able to seek. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for every person who feels that their hearts are shackled, sometimes you feel like, khalas, I've done so much sin. وَرَبُّكَ الْغَفُورُ ذُو الرَّحْمَةِ. Allah is reminding you, don't worry, it doesn't matter how bad your heart is. It doesn't matter what you have done. وَرَبُّكَ, your Rabb, O Prophet of Allah, al-Ghafur, He is the one who is so forgiving. Dhur Rahmah. He is the possessor of mercy. Over here, the ulama, they said this particular ayah is specifically for the sinners amongst the Muslims. This ayah is talking about the sinners amongst the Muslims. وَرَبُّكَ الْغَفُورُ. Allah, your Lord, O Prophet of Allah, is all forgiving. Dhur Rahmah, He is full of mercy. لو يؤاخذهم بما كسبوا لعجل لهم العذاب. Allah is, His sign of His Rahmah is what? Allah is like, if Allah wishes to hold us accountable, certainly لعجل لهم العذاب. He would have hastened their punishment. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَلْ لَهُم مَوْعِدٌ لَن يَجِدُوا مِن دُونِهِ مَوْئِلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that for people, certain people, there is going to be an appointment. I.e. appointment of what? Two things. Appointment on the Day of Judgment, or appointment in this dunya where Allah might hold them accountable. Because we know that there are certain sins that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold the person accountable in this dunya qabla al-akhirah. There are certain sins that if a person does in this dunya, he shall not leave this world except that Allah will hold him accountable for that sin in this dunya. Okay? لو يؤاخذهم بما كسبوا لعجل لهم العذاب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if He comes to hold them accountable of that which they have earned, لعجل لهم العذاب. Allah would have hastened the adhab for them. بل لهم موعد. Indeed, for them is a promise. لن يجدوا من دونه موئلا. They are not going to find, other than that appointed time, any refuge. Okay? وتلك القرى أهلكناهم لما ظلموا. And when a nation on the whole, their natural disposition becomes that they are sinners, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, وَتِلْكَ الْقُرَى. And these societies, those nations, أَهْلَكْنَاهُمْ, we destroyed them when masses become transgressive. لَمَّا ظَلَمُوا, when the entire society becomes of a society that is wrong, or they are persistently wrong, they choose to be wrong. وَجَعَلْنَا لِمَهْلِكِهِمْ مَوْعِدًا. And Allah is like, even such societies, they can't live long. Allah has created a destined time for their destruction. Okay? You're going to find that societies in general, they follow an up and down, right? And if you've studied a little bit of history, you'll get to know that in general, the Western civilization is on decline. Their decline has begun. And there is something, the global South, Africa, the Southeast Asia, they're going to rise. It's like written on the walls of anybody who knows a little bit of history that this is going to happen, right? And you can see that the rise of the global South, you'll see articles written about that and stuff like that. That's why there's massive Morgan and Stanley and stuff. These people are like investing massively in South Africa right now. They're buying lands and mines, they're just going crazy right now. The reason is they know that the global South is going to rise right now. And you're seeing that with the power shift, with the ICC, you're seeing that with South Africa, you're seeing that with Guinea, you're seeing that with all these countries that have no say in the world scale are coming. It's like, oh, we're going to file the thing against them. We're going to file. Huh? Like, where did you have all these countries? How are they coming? It's not. It's a power shift. And this has always been the case. If you go back 87 years ago, 100 years ago, right? There's actually a letter that was sent to the king of Somalia from Saudis, asking the king of Somalia that, be generous to us and donate some of your zakat to Makkah so that, Makkah can be taken care of. Yeah. Huh? Yeah, there's actually, it's online, that document. A letter went from the Sadat of Makkah, the leaders of Makkah. They sent a letter to the king of Somalia saying, be generous to us. We are desperately looking for some money. You remember, house of Allah is yours as much as ours. Please support and donate, and we are in need of your money. Okay. Move another 50 years ago, India was the one who was basically the sole, like every single expense was coming from India and Turkey. They were the ones that are taking care of all of those expenses. So this is a natural sequence of life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that even those nations that we think should be destroyed, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, وَجَعَلْنَا لِمَهْلِكِهِمْ مَوْعِدًا. Don't worry. Even those nations, لَمَّا ظَلَمُوا, even when they become transgressive, we have a certain time that we're going to destroy them. And that is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knows what is His hikmah and when He will do all of that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability to understand. We stopped a little bit earlier because I don't want to start the story of Musa alayhi salam. There is a break. That's why I wanted to end here. Next week, the hub is closed. So there's no classes here. And we'll reconvene post that, inshallah. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. If you guys have any questions related to this or whatever we have covered, feel free to ask. We have a couple of minutes. I think there is also pizza. Somebody helped.
So all these are general. So these
Yeah.
not related to any of these.
This is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells a story. So if you look at Yusuf alayhi salam's story, Yusuf alayhi salam, a story, scene. And then Allah gives you like advice. These are not generic. These are the purpose of the story. This is why the story is being told. The story of the people of the garden was told to us. People who ran after money. Al-malu wal-banunu zinatul hayatid dunya wal-baqiyatu salihatu. All of that was told to us because don't be like that person. So from there, the entire page and a half is all about aqeedah, iman building, akhirah. And it's not generic. It's actually so very much linked with the entire story. And also even like now, as soon as Allah is like, وَجَعَلْنَا لِمَهْلِكِهِمْ مَوْعِدًا, what's right after this? وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ. Huh? Huh? Again? No, after that. What's after that? وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ. Right? تِلْكَ الْقُرَى is right after that. Isn't it? Yeah, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ. So, what was the nation that was destroyed? Now I was like, okay, let me tell you about now a nation that was destroyed. So Allah is like, every nation that has transgressed, there is a time for their destruction. Okay? وَجَعَلْنَا لِمَهْلِكِهِمْ مَوْعِدًا. Was Banu Israel destroyed like previous nations? No, they weren't. So Allah is like, let me tell you a little bit about Bani Israel because you're going to have to deal with them, O Muslims. But remember, their destruction is also destined. لَمَّا ظَلَمُوا, no matter how long they transgress, their time is going to come. And then over here, the story of Musa alayhi salam comes. Did the Jews ask about the story of Musa alayhi salam? No, they did not. They tried testing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the lack of his knowledge. So Allah brings in the story of Musa alayhi salam to say, oh, you're testing my Nabi? How about your own Nabi who didn't have knowledge? Let me tell you a story about something that happened to him. And that's the entire link and sequence of how these ayat are connected.